Hello and welcome to week 2 of English 1302 online. This week we are continuing our journey with Shirley Jackson, and we will be focusing on the chapter work that we need to get through to write or talk about how to write research reports, which is what we're going to be focusing on in this particular class. We're going to be doing a compare and contrast of the two stories we read last week, and I will be introducing you to what our first research report is going to look like. Actually, the parameters, the instructions for it, we will get into much more detail next week in week 3. But first, let's talk about the chapter work. All right, so hopefully you have waited till this week to open up the textbook, which is located here in the Important Class Links hub. The link to it should be right here for you. This is our textbook online. You are perfectly welcome to purchase the textbook in the physical form, should you wish to. I would recommend Amazon or any of the online book purchasers. I know that we have a bookstore, an online bookstore through Lee College, which you can find from the Lee College homepage. But if you did buy the ebook, this is where you would access it. If you haven't bought the ebook yet, hear me out. There is a 2-week free trial period for you to access the textbook. You just have to sign up for it. You should be able to access all of the chapter work that we have in that 2-week period. All of our chapter work for this course is in this second week. And that's by design. Since we are going from a 16-week course to a 10-week course for the summer, we had to kind of squish it in a little bit. So normally these chapters would have been in 2 separate weeks, actually 3 separate weeks, but we've condensed it down to 1 week so that we can get through it. And if you only have the trial period of the textbook, you can get through all of your work in that 1-week period. Now, you will lose access to the textbook after the trial period is up, but you will have been able to complete the assignments. And the only reason I would hesitate to tell you to purchase the book, because there is a lot of great information in there for use later in the course or in future courses, is because they are adopting the new edition for fall. So that information is going to change. If you have an ebook, it's going to expire after a certain amount of time anyways. If you do purchase the physical copy, it should be fairly inexpensive from Amazon or other resellers if you buy it used. And then you would have it as a reference for later papers. If not, most of this information is available for free online in other various places, and I'm happy to help you find that. But because of how this course was set up, we're required to use this textbook. So that being said, we have 6 chapters that we need to get through this week. And I know that sounds daunting, but I promise you they are not very long. They are somewhat interesting in terms of writing a research paper, and there's a lot of good information in them. So if you can, just for this week, take a deep breath, have an open mind, and read through them, you'll be fine. So let me show you how to access the book. You just click on it, and it will probably give you a third-party window. For me, it opens right into the book because no matter what I do, I've already accessed this book. So it's always going to come up for me. But the first time you access it, it's probably going to ask you for your email or an access code, or tell you that you have to have an access code in order to use it, or offer you the free trial. Hopefully it offers you the free trial regardless of what it says. I would say go ahead and put your name, your email, and everything in there so that you can access the free trial. Even if you decide that you're going to purchase it. And if you do decide that you're going to purchase it, I believe it gives you steps to do that. If not, again, you can purchase it from the bookstore that we have. I would just type in bookstore on the Lee College main homepage. But it's obviously taking its sweet time to come up right now. But the very first page is the cover. Let me see. Maybe a note about the cover. I swear to you, it came up before I started recording. There we go. So that's the cover. If it will come up, it's probably just because it's a big file. Let's just go with this. My goodness, technology. Yay, ebooks. All right, so the cover looks like this. So that way you know you have the right book. Uh, if you got edition, the 10th edition, it's slightly different. Unfortunately, this link will only let you into the 9th edition. So, and some of the information has changed in the 10th edition. I haven't actually taken a look at that one yet. So we're dealing with the 9th edition. All right. And how you get to everything, all of your table of contents is here. All of your chapters are here. We are looking at chapters 4, 17, 18, and then 19, 20, and 21. So they're broken up into two different assignments. And basically what you're asked to do, if we take a look at the assignment at themselves here in assignments, you are being asked to read through these chapters, write 3 questions or comments for each of the chapters for a total of 9 questions or comments, which sounds like a lot, but this is just to make sure that you are covering those chapters. Again, they're kind of short, and these questions and comments, they are up to you. Any question that you have about what you're reading in that chapter or any comment that you have is valid. I would please suggest that you try to keep them serious and scholarly related and keep the comments like, I hate this kind of stuff to a minimum. I'm not saying that's not a valid comment because it is English and reading about English is kind of dry work. But please try to keep a growth mindset, an open growth mindset about this because the information in these chapters is the foundation for what we're going to be doing. And even if you don't have access to these chapters beyond the free trial, you will still have access to any of the comments that you make in the discussion board for these assignments. So what you're going to do is make 3 questions or comments for each chapter. My suggestion would be to put those questions and comments on a Word doc or in a Google Doc, and then copy the questions and comments, copy and paste them into the discussion board. Because this is a discussion board assignment because we're not face to face. So it's very difficult for us to have a conversation about the information in these chapters. So we're doing it in discussion boards so that you can discuss amongst yourselves, and I will come in and try to answer questions as I can in that discussion board, as if we were doing an actual face-to-face discussion. So make sure that you put in 3 questions or comments for each chapter for a total of 9, and then you need to respond to 2 classmates' posts. So this is a little bit different from what we did this last week. Well, yeah, I guess we did that with the Life and Times of Shirley Jackson. But respond to at least 2 classmates' posts. You don't have to respond to all 9 of their questions and comments. You can choose 1 or 2, depending on how you feel about it, to respond to whatever moves you the most to write, whatever you relate to the most. And I think you'll find that you will relate to a lot of the same things. Some people don't like something, some people have a question about something. Again, I realize it's the chapter work, it's really dry, kind of boring, but important. I promise you that our discussion boards will be less dry in the future. There'll be more about the stories. But for this week, we are focusing on chapter work and the stories, which we'll get into. So you've got 4, 17, and 18 in this first assignment. The second assignment is 19, 20, and 21. And if we take a look at those chapters, we can go right in here, click on the chapters. I'll take you right to it. Chapter 4 is arguments based on facts and reasons and logos. And the whole reason we are not going through all of the chapters in the book, you are, of course, welcome to explore any of the chapters in this book outside of the ones that I have assigned. We're just not going through them because it really should be more of a review. If you've taken 1301, then you've already gone through a lot of these concepts. Again, because it's a shortened class, I need to really focus us in on the information that we need for writing the papers. So that's what I've done. So chapter 4 is about arguments based on facts and logos, basically facts and logic. Remember, there's logos, pathos, and ethos. Logos stands for logical. Uh, Pathos stands for emotional arguments, and ethos stands for ethical arguments. In other words, um, the ethics of it, the legality of things, what is right and what is wrong. Logos is the logic, what sounds right or what seems to be logically correct. And then pathos is emotional, how like sympathy, empathy, how it makes us feel, or what emotions the argument is playing on. But we want to try to focus our arguments for research purposes on the logical, for sure, number one, and ethos, kind of a secondary. Um, Emotional arguments in a research paper should not come into play unless you are arguing against them with logic. So that's what we're really focusing on. So that's why we're looking at this. And let's see, it starts on page 57. The page number is right here. And I was hoping that you would read through all of this. The sections are fairly small. This is a good one about how to spot fake news as soon as it comes up. And there's some interesting ideas here about what's going on. I thought this was the most interesting about how pictures have been doctored since the 1930s, probably since photography began, honestly. Um, so, see, I believe this is the original picture and this is the doctored one where they added in this person to make him look like he was standing with Joseph Stalin. Interesting choice. But it does look very well done. And I can attest that pictures have been being doctored since the late 80s when I was an executive secretary in the 90s, also putting together flyers and things before Photoshop existed. So, anyways, it's a really good uh, part of the chapter about how to spot fake news. This one's important about thinking critically about hard evidence. In other words, questioning it. You need to question everything and you need to look for the evidence that backs it up. Again, as soon as it comes up. There we go. Um, so again, I think this is a really interesting read. I'm not going to go through every single thing here, but there's a lot of good stuff just in chapter 4. When our next chapter that we're looking at for this particular assignment is chapter 17. And that is an introduction to academic arguments and understanding what an academic argument is, how to develop one. And then the interesting thing here is that it gives you 2 examples of academic arguments, what that looks like. You're welcome to read through them. I think it's a good idea too, so you can get an idea. They're not exactly what we're going to be doing, but it does. I think the one is a student essay, and one is an essay written by somebody who was actually paid to do it. So be sure to read through those so you can get an idea of what an academic argument looks like. And then finally, for this particular assignment, chapter 18 is talking about finding your evidence and how to start looking for evidence when you're writing a research paper. We will be talking about evidence finding more next week, and while I will be introducing you to the actual assignment of our essay this week, we'll be focusing more on it next week. But this is a good one about how to find it, how to consider what you're being asked, how to search, and just collecting data on your own, drawing upon narratives as evidence. All very good, very important. So chapter 18, 17, and 4 for that first assignment. The second assignment I have put in chapters 19, 20, and 21. So you kind of see where this is all leading. Chapter 19 is about evaluating sources, and this is very important. In if you don't have good sources, you're not going to have good evidence. And if you don't have good evidence, you're not going to support your argument very well. So this talks about how to evaluate these sources, identifying biases in the sources. And as much as we would love to think that everyone is unbiased, we know this to be untrue. Just about everything has some kind of, I don't know, bias, bent, agenda. So this helps you identify those biases. Some are helpful, some are not. It just depends on what your argument is. Also talks about assessing sources, which is something we're going to go into more next week when we talk about the difference between popular media and scholarly sources. You'll be asked to have scholarly sources for this paper. Practicing crap detection. And this is actually a real acronym. Um, and uh, it's about detecting crap. Information tainted by ignorance, inept communication, or deliberate deception. Thank you, Ernest Hemingway. So I think crap actually stood for something. I'm not sure if they go through that in the chapter or not, but they really do mean um, crap in every sense of the word. So be sure to read it. It's not just a clickbait title. It's actually a good one. And then finally, assessing field research, which is something that we're probably not going to get into for this class. For this course, we really don't have that much, but if you're interested, it talks about how you can use data that you get from experiments, surveys, interviews, etc., to further your paper. Again, probably not so much for us, but if you are pursuing a scientific career, if you'll be writing papers for science or math, or even sometimes history or anything that has to do with anthology in the future, this is probably going to be something that you might be interested in. So that's chapter 19. And then let's see, we've got chapters 20 and 21. 20 is about using sources and I think the most important thing here is how to find good sources. And then finally, synthesizing information is a good one in this particular chapter. And that's how do you take that information that you've gathered and how do you put it together and quote unquote synthesize it with other information that you found so that you can make it make sense to answer the prompt that you're being asked. And it also talks about paraphrasing, etc. So very important part of this particular chapter. Then finally, we have chapter 21, which is about maintaining academic integrity. And this is a big hot button uh, given everything that's been going on lately with AI and everything else. But this is more related to plagiarism. So this is talking about how to make sure that you give credit where credit is due in your papers. This actually used to be our number one problem in academia, is that people were not giving the proper credit where credit was due. They would use sources without giving them credit. They tried to pass it off as their own ideas, and that doesn't really work because you are basically still first year, second year college students, and uh, these ideas are not necessarily your own, but what it is when you're looking to back up your own ideas, you're looking for other people who have had those same ideas, and you're showing people, look, I'm not crazy. Here's my idea, and somebody else agrees with me, and then you give them credit for what they have to say about it. So, um, it's a good and necessary chapter about making sure that you are crediting your sources. I wouldn't so worry so much about getting permission for and using copyrighted information. Again, we are not writing papers that are long enough for that, but someday you might. So it's definitely good to go over that section. You want to also acknowledge your sources accurately and appropriately, and this talks about how to do that, and crediting collaborators if you had anybody help you with a particular research project. Now, clearly, that doesn't count for this class because no one should be helping you. These papers are not so long that you should be able to write them yourself. Uh, but there you go. Chapter 22 is worthy of reading, but not on our particular assignment list at this time. It's about documenting your sources. Again, there's a lot of great information in the rest of this book. There's MLA information in here. There is APA information in here. It's actually a really good resource book. Unfortunately, we only have access to it on the ebook here. But like I said, if you're interested in purchasing it, there is a physical copy. You can get that from such places like Amazon with the ISBN number that is on the syllabus. I can also provide that for you should you want it. All right, so that's our chapter work for the week. Now, our other assignment for the week is the compare and contrast. And this is something we're going to be doing in every module with the stories that we're going to be reading. So remember, our modules are set up that we have 3 different authors, and we'll be reading 2 short stories from each author. And then we'll be discussing those stories with the discussion questions, assignments that you did. And then finally, the most important one is going to be the compare and contrast, where you're going to come in and basically answer a few questions in your first response, and then you're going to respond to 2 classmates, and this will be how our discussion board works. So in your initial post about the Shirley Jackson stories, the lottery, and the possibility of evil, you're going to respond to these three prompts or 3 questions. So the first one is identify a moment from either the lottery or the possibility of evil that surprised or disturbed you. The second one is draw on specific passages from both texts, compare how Jackson uses ordinary people to reveal extraordinary moral failures. And then finally, how do you believe Jackson uses polite behavior or social conventions to conceal more sinister intentions in each story? So these are the compare and contrast. Like I said, it's compare and contrast, a very specific and pointed compare and contrast, not just 3 ways they're alike or 3 ways they're different, but answering these 3 questions. So make sure in your first response by the first due date, which is here, um, that you answer those 3 prompts. Uh, you don't have to summarize the story. We've all read the same story, so focus on specific analysis. And make sure you answer it completely, right? Don't just throw up a few words, so yeah, I agree or anything like that. Please use complete sentences. Use your words. Y'all are college students. You got this. And then that's what you're going to do by the first due date. By the second due date, you need to respond to what everybody has written by the first due date. So respond to other people identifying or answering those 3 questions or prompts here. And you might agree with them, you might disagree with them, you might find their specific analysis very interesting, or it might be something you hadn't thought of. Just respond honestly and civilly, and it's okay to disagree. In fact, I think it's great when students disagree, not because it's entertaining. I mean, kind of it is, but because it opens up opportunities for us to talk about new ideas and find out why that person thinks that. Especially if it's different from you. I think that's the most important thing, is to find out why. Why does somebody think differently? What are they seeing that I'm not seeing? That's a great way to look at that. In any case, you have to make sure that you do all of these, 1 post and 2 responses, by the due date, the second due date, which is here. Uh, but that is our compare and contrast. And again, this is going to be in lieu of a class discussion, because this is the only way we can have a discussion. And I will probably pop in here and ask questions and maybe provide some thought or guidance as we go along. But those are the 3 assignments that we have due this week. Again, chapters 4, 17, and 18 is 1 assignment. Chapters 19, 20, and 21 is the second assignment. And then finally, the last one is the compare and contrast. Now you can see some other stuff here that we're going to be doing in the week after. I do want to introduce you, and you should be able to see research report number 1 instructions this week. It will be opening up. So let's take a look at that. And I want you to read through this at your leisure. Do not be intimidated by this. This is the actual instructions for our research report. We will be going through it again in week 3, and we'll be doing some assignments such as thesis writing and that sort of thing to get us prepared for our paper in week 3. But week 3 will be our first full week of working on this, with the research, with the peer review being due at the end of week 3. And then the peer review is just a rough draft. It's not a peer review on your final draft. It's a peer review on your rough draft. But it is important that you have a rough draft, because points would be taken off of your final draft if you do not participate in the rough draft and peer review. So be sure that you are on that for that. But I'm just introducing you to this now so you can start thinking about it now that you've read the stories and you have an idea of where we're going with this for the paper. So our papers are going to be at least 1,000 words, which is only about 5 pages, 4.5 to 5 pages. Don't get hung up on the word count. Trust me, if you are writing these papers and answering the prompts, you will get there. It's not an issue. So it's going to be, you're going to be writing an argument-driven research essay in response to one of these following prompts. And I'm going to give you 2 prompts. You choose one. You don't write on both, just choose one. And you're going to be using the stories, the lottery, or the possibility of evil, or potentially both. And you're going to be using some outside sources and real life situations, or even literary situations, in other words, other stories from either fiction or nonfiction, to answer these questions. So I'm not going to read this word for word because you can certainly read it, but I'm going to read the prompts. So the first prompt is right here. It's in bold. You can kind of see it. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I use dark mode. But the actual first prompt is this: relating back to how tradition is handled in the lottery, how should modern societies evaluate the value of long-standing traditions? When does preserving tradition become ethically problematic? And who gets to decide which traditions are worth keeping? So that's the question you are answering right here. That's the prompt. And then this gives you some information about how, or suggestions for how to answer this prompt. So there's a lot of tradition in the lottery, and you need to decide how that relates to the real world and traditions that we have. Some people love the traditions that we have. Some people find them problematic. Who gets to decide which ones are worth keeping, and who gets to decide which ones are not? That's what I want you to discuss in relation to the lottery. In other words, you have to relate it back to what they did in the lottery and how that relates to the real world. And there is quite a bit of information out there about traditions. And remember, you need to make sure you have some scholarly sources for that. So that's what you're going to be looking at, is how does the modern world deal with traditions, and should we have them or not? That's the first prompt if you want to answer that question. The second prompt, should you choose this one, is right here. And it is: what are the ethical responsibilities of individuals when communicating anonymously or semi-anonymously in digital spaces? How does Jackson's story, The Possibility of Evil, reflect or warn against behaviors we now see on social media? And what can we learn from it? Okay, so our real world situation here is how people are dealing with each other on social media, all kinds of different social medias, and what ethical responsibilities do they have, and how. And what you need to do is tie that back to The Possibility of Evil. How does Miss Strangeworth, I should say, I'm sorry, Miss Strangeworth, deal with that in that story? How is it like what we have today in social media? All right. So again, there's plenty of academic research out there on social media and the effects of social media. So you shouldn't have any issue finding anything for this. Now, here's the requirements for the assignment. It's at least 1,000 words. You have to use at least one of the Jackson stories. You have to have at least 2 academic sources from the library database. It can also be from Google Scholar, but they must be academic. And again, we're going to go over what academic really means. Uh, you can have popular media sources after you have two academic sources. And popular media sources are anything that you can get to from the internet that's like really anything, like anything you can Google, basically. You have to go into Google Scholar to get to academic sources, and some of those are free, some of those are not. If you go to the library database of journals at the Lee College Library, which we're going to talk about next week, they can help you with finding sources. So make sure you have your sources. It's going to have to be in MLA format, which again we will also go over next week. Um, and there is an automatic deduction of 20 points if you are missing the MLA formatting. If you make no attempt at MLA formatting whatsoever, it's automatically 20 points off. Formatting is very important. I kind of went over that in the start here about why formatting is important, but you are in college now and you have been, and you should have been formatting things. So MLA format important. It's part of what we're doing this semester. In-text citations for information you use. If you don't have any in-text citations for the information, if you just kind of write through it and don't cite your sources, that's 20 points off. And if you don't have a works cited page, which is part of the MLA formatting, but you'd be surprised at how many people just want to present information and not say where they got it from. So those are all important. Also, if you do not participate in the peer review, uh, it's 20 points off. So I'm sorry to be so strict about that, but that's how strongly I feel that these are important to the process of writing, particularly the peer review. But the formatting is also important. Is your content important? Absolutely. But if your formatting is bad, that can be worse than your content being great. If you had the most beautiful content, the most perfect paper, but you provided it in a format that looked like absolute garbage, and made it almost impossible to read, then it's very hard to ignore that in grading. In any case, here is this. You can totally read through the instructions at your leisure. Those will always be up all the way to the end of the class. But that's what we are looking at in terms of our research paper. And this research paper will be due at the end of week 4 for us. So that, I believe, is towards the end of June. Actually, we can take a look real quick. It should tell us that June 27th for us. So, all right, that is what our week looks like. I know it's a little bit daunting. This will be the only time we have chapter work for the rest of the course. So once we're through this chapter work, there will be none in subsequent modules, and we will have a far fewer assignments as we progress through the course. So if you have any questions, as always, please shoot me an email, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.